Hey everybody, here we are. So hopefully you have had a chance to take a thought for your Rube Goldberg machines. Hopefully you've been trying to come up with the actual thing you want your Rube Goldberg to do. Maybe it's pulling a Kleenex out of a box, or maybe it's knocking something down at the very end. That's something that you should be coming up with. You should also be beginning to watch these videos on the Rube Goldberg and making some ideas of what you want to do. Well, when we were last together in the notes, we were talking about resistance. And we defined resistance as any force that opposes our attempts to get work done. And one of them was friction. Friction is one of those forces, one of those resistances that causes the motion between two surfaces to be reduced. And I had this picture, and we talked about the door on the top and the door on the bottom, how because that door was so heavy, it had a lot of resistance, so it was going to need more effort, more force to open it. Whereas the bottom door had very little resistance. In fact, it's got a doorknob on it, so it needed very little effort to move. But friction isn't all bad. If we had a world without friction, and resistance isn't all bad, if we had a world without friction, you would never be able to stand up. You would never be able to walk, because we have floors that are made out of different types of resistance. It would be like trying to walk on glazed ice all the time. And as you can see in these pictures, glazed ice is not the easiest thing to walk on. But friction is not only on the floors that we walk on, it's the air that we walk through, the water that we walk through. It's all around us. And all these resistances are important. Some of the things that I think about resistance is a story that I used to hear. And it was a man that felt there was a giant rock in his yard. And he felt like God told him that he needed to push on the rock. And so the man, for the rest of his life, pushed on the rock. And he pushed, and he pushed, and he pushed, and he pushed, and he grew old. And finally, he died. And he went to heaven, and he was very upset. And he said, Lord, I knew you wanted me to push on that rock. I knew you wanted me to move the rock. So I pushed, and I pushed, and I pushed, and I did what you wanted me to do, but the rock never moved. I failed. And the Lord said, well, I never told you to move the rock. I told you to push on it. But look what happened in your life when you pushed on the rock. And almost as if we could go in a reverse on a film, the Lord reversed and showed that the man, that as he pushed on the rock, his muscles grew strong. As he stayed outside, he was able to just grow more and more strong in his body, and he was able to talk to people that were outside of his house, and he was able to do so many things. The Lord had only asked him to push on the rock, not move the rock. So friction kind of makes me think of that we often look at friction and go, oh, it's terrible, we shouldn't have it, and yet friction is there to help us do the things that we have to do. Excuse me about that. So we do measure this. We can measure force and we can measure distance. And that's going to lead us to the next topic. And that is this silly machine. This is a spring scale. Sorry, I have to cough. This is a spring scale. And if we were in the classroom, we'd be using a couple labs using spring scales and seeing how they work. If you look on the picture on the right hand side, there's a block on the bottom. That's going to be something that I am putting on my spring scale to find out how much force do I need to move that block. And the scale, as you can see, it has a spring in it. That's what that circly little line is. The spring actually can help me to figure out how much force I need to have in there. So if you look up at the red circle, you'll see the letter N. We measure force or effort in newtons, named after Sir Isaac Newton. And we would take whatever we were going to try and move, we call it the load, and put it on the bottom of the spring scale, and we would hang onto the ring at the top. And the spring would go down, and it would measure how many newtons we need to overcome the resistance. What's the resistance? The thing that we're trying to carry or lift or whatever we're trying. It's resisting us. Maybe I'm picking up a rock. Well, a rock is resisting my efforts to do it, and it's resisting it thanks to the law of gravity. We measure it in newtons, and we use a spring scale to do that. So here's some kids in classrooms using spring scales. Ours look a little bit different in the classroom, but they all do the same thing. We have a resistance on one side. The guy has a hockey puck up at the top. It looks like the kids down on the bottom are lifting a notebook, and I'm not sure, it looks like a weight on the big tall picture. But all of them are trying to measure in newtons how much force they need to move those objects. Now, sometimes we don't have enough effort to get some work done. Would you believe me if I told you that I could move something that weighed the exact same amount as a walrus, and I could move it fairly easily? Would you believe me? A walrus weighs anywhere from 1.5 tons to 2 tons. That's 3,000 to 4,000 pounds. So would you believe me if I said I could move something that weighed that much? Well, I couldn't do it by myself. I don't have the effort that could do that. But I could do it if I had a little help. We need help, and we need a tool. Now, I don't have a picture of me pushing a car, but a car weighs between 1.5 tons and 2 tons. But I have pushed cars. Even recently, I've pushed cars. Why can I do that, but I couldn't push a walrus? Because down on the bottom of the car, there's wheels. And those wheels take some of the effort that I am using, and they help me use that effort to move the car. So this chapter is on tools. Tools that we use to do the work that we need. Now let me give you another example. Suppose you have a piece of wood and you want to put a nail in the wood. Do you take your hand and pound the nail? Hopefully not. Hopefully you use a hammer. So tools increase our effort. They increase our force so that we can do the work that we need to do. We have 6 specific simple tools that we're going to talk about. And simple machines or simple tools are tools that make the work easier by decreasing the force you must add. That's what a simple machine is. There's pulleys and levers and wheels, like I mentioned out of that car. There's screws and wedges and inclined planes. All of these help us to do the work that we need to do, even move cars. There are 3 things in particular that using a machine helps you to do. Hopefully you thought with a nail and a piece of wood, yeah, a hammer would probably be a good idea to use. But one of the things that a machine does, it multiplies the amount of force that we add. Now, if I can add just as much force as my muscles can add, and then I add a hammer to that, it's multiplying how much I'm hitting that nail, and it's going to drive the nail through the wood. So machines can multiply how much force we are adding. They can also change the direction of the force, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. When I'm using a machine to lift something, if I use a pulley, I can lift it up very easily, and I'm not trying to lift it up over my head. And lastly, they multiply the speed or the distance that the force can move something. Now, not all 3 of these happen at the same time. One of these or 2 of these can happen together and will really make your work a lot easier. And we're going to look at some different machines that do just this. So as you think of your Rube Goldberg machine, we're using a variety of machines to do a task that we want to do. So you're going to be using a variety of simple machines to go through and make something happen in your home that's going to finish the simple task. I want you to take a look at page 8 through 10 in your notes. That's a written copy of what we talked about for what needs to be done in your Rube Goldberg machine. You should be working on it. You should be beginning to think about it. It's going to be a while before these are due, so they're not due like at the end of the week or anything. It's going to take us, this is a long-term project, but you should be working on it now and getting those ideas made. So I have a homework paper for you today. It's called, I believe, Work. I came up with a really clever title there. Work homework. So make sure you do that. Now I will tell you, if you picked up your papers at the school, I have changed the homework for this chapter a little bit. So the papers that you picked up might not be the same as the papers that are the homework assignments that I'm going to assign. So if you need anything written out or beyond that, let me know. If you can just print out the 1 or 2 pages that are different, that would be great. And of course you can do this all on the computer because they are going to be Google Docs. All right, guys, have a good day.